Hi, everyone. My name is Antonio Mayo. I'm a Microsoft MVP and part of the M365 Voice podcast. This is the first in a video series where I'm going to show you how to set up, run, and view big data analytics in SharePoint Online. This is going to involve a few different components in the Microsoft Cloud. Specifically, we're going to use Microsoft Graph Data Connect, Azure Synapse, and Power BI. We're also going to use Project Archimedes, which is part of the Microsoft Syntex product family. Now, Project Archimedes is designed to help you extract data and analytics from very large enterprise class SharePoint Online environments. Imagine environments where you have 10,000 sites, 20,000 sites, or 50,000 sites, or 100,000 users. Extracting data across all of those sites or users, data like permissions, or site properties, or capacity information about your sites, is in fact a big data problem. And solving it efficiently requires a data pipeline which is not throttled and which allows you to get at the data sets you need quickly in order to answer important questions about such large environments. Project Archimedes provides you with access to those data sets, and the Microsoft Graph Data Connect provides you with that pipeline. In this first video, I'm going to show you how to set up all of the prerequisites you need in order to use Project Archimedes. Let's jump in and take a look. I'm logged into Microsoft 365 as a global admin. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new mail-enabled security group. So I'm going to come to Teams and Groups, Active Teams and Groups, and I'm going to go to Mail-Enabled Security. Now, specifically, we need a Mail-Enabled Azure AD security group. So I'm going to click New, go into the wizard, choose Mail-Enabled Security, and hit Next. I'm going to give it a name, and in this case, I'm going to call it Data Approvers. I'm going to choose myself as the owner. And then I'm actually going to choose another user as the members, as a member, at least one other user. And in this case, I have an account called Data Request Approver. Now, this is important because whenever I submit a request to the Microsoft Graph Data Connect pipeline, that request needs to be approved and needs to be approved by a different user than the person that submitted the request. So you kind of need at least two users in this group. So myself as the owner and Data Request Approver as a member. And the users within this group, in order to approve the request, need to either be global admins or global readers in the tenant. So it's important that the users have one of those roles. The minimum role needed to approve the request is global reader. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to just give it an email address. There we go, create group. Okay. Now, once my group's created, I'm now going to come down to settings, and I'm going to go to org settings. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to validate my data location. Now, what that means is the location or region or data center where your tenant was created or currently sits. I'm going to go to organizational profile, and I'm going to go to data location. And here we can see that the majority of services, the core services here, so Exchange, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, and Teams, they're located in Canada. And I happen to know that our tenant is homed or instantiated in the Canada Central Data Center. This is going to be important for future steps that we perform in Azure AD, and we'll talk about those later. You can see there's a couple of other services here that are hosted in the United States. Those were added later, but it's important that you just take note of the region where your tenant is located. In our case, it's Canada. Okay, now I'm going to come to org settings, and I'm going to scroll down under the services here, and I'm going to look for Microsoft Graph Data Connect, this option right here. Okay. Now in this option, I have a few options to choose from. The Microsoft Graph Data Connect pipeline is actually disabled by default, and I need to check this box here to turn it on. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to specify that data approvers group. Again, when I submit a request to Microsoft Graph Data Connect for data, that request needs to be approved, and it's users in this group that are able to actually approve it. It needs to be a different person approving it than the person that submitted the request. Now, I need to at least turn on SharePoint Online and OneDrive so that those data sets become available to me. And I'm going to highlight this note here that's included. It can take up to 48 hours for SharePoint Online and OneDrive datasets to be accessible after you enable this option. And I would say that's not it in fact does take 48 hours for those data sets to become available to Microsoft Graph Data Connect. From my testing, I found it did in fact take 48 hours for that to happen. I'm actually also going to turn on Viva Insights because I think that's a really interesting option that I'm going to try to show in future videos or content. And before I save that, I'm going to actually show or highlight this link here, Privileged Access Management Portal. I'm going to open that up in another tab. And if we take a look at that, this is where the data requests approvals show up. So later on, I'm going to use Azure Synapse to submit an access for data. The approval for that request is going to show up here in this privileged access request page. So it's important to note where this is. And again, it's one of the data approvers, the members of the data approver group, that needs to come into here and actually approve that request. So just make note that your access to that page is in fact through the link here under Microsoft Graph Data Connect. Okay, and we're going to save that option. Okay, and once that's saved, we're now going to switch over to Azure AD. So I'm going to come here into Microsoft Azure, so portal.azure.com, and I'm going to actually come to Azure AD. So I'm going to actually come into here and just type Azure Active Directory, and you can find all of the different Azure options that you need by searching for it in that search bar. It's actually really handy. Okay, once we're in Azure AD, we're going to come to app registrations, and we're going to register a new app for the Microsoft Graph Data Connect in order for it to have access to the data. Okay, so here under app registrations, I'm going to do new registration, and this is a pretty straightforward step. I'm going to call this Microsoft Graph Data Connect app. And I'm going to leave this option here, accounts in this organizational directory only. I'm going to leave that one selected, and I'm going to click register. And this is going to create that application. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to look here under, you can see here, client credentials right here. So I'm going to click add certificate or secret. Okay, and in the client secrets tab, I'm going to click plus new client secret. And I'm going to give a description. So I'm going to call it MGDC, short for Microsoft Graph Data Connect secret. And I'm going to choose a slightly different expiry date. I tend to like 12 months myself. And I'm going to hit add. So there's our client secret. Now it's important to note, if I navigate away from this page, I'm not going to be able to access that client secret anymore. It's not going to show it to me. It only shows it to me right after creation. So I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need that value later. And I'm going to just paste it into a notepad file that I have here for us to use later. Okay, and I'm going to save that. All right, now I'm going to come back to the overview tab. And in here, I'm going to also make note of the application or client ID. That is another value that I'm going to need later. So I'm going to copy that also, and I'm going to paste that in my notepad file here. So I'm going to application. There we go. And again, I'm going to save my notepad file. Okay, so I've got those two values and I've got my app registered here. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do here in Azure is I'm going to create an Azure storage account. Sorry, not storage account, not yet. I'm going to create a resource group. So I'm going to come under here. No, I happen to have some recent ones that I access, resource group. So I'm going to come under resource group here. Right? And I want to create a new resource group, which is going to contain the resources that I'm going to use for Project Archimedes. So I'm going to create a new resource group. Click create. Okay, here we go. Now, the first thing I have to do is I have to actually choose a subscription. So you need to have an Azure pay-as-you-go subscription already set up. And I, in fact, created one here earlier as just part of a free trial. So this is a free trial subscription. And I'm going to give my resource group a name. So I'm going to call it MGDC underscore, let's just call it resource group. Now, I can't have any spaces in the resource group name. I can only have letters and numbers. So that's why you see the underscores there. Now, an important step here is under the region. I have to choose the same region as my M365 tenant. So remember, I said my region was Canada earlier, so I'm going to actually choose Canada Central because I know that's where my data center happens to be. Okay. And now I'm going to choose Review and Create. Okay. I can see my validation pass, which is great. And now I'm going to choose Create. Okay. So my resource group got created. Now I'm going to go and create a new storage account. So I'm going to come back in here, and again, storage account is an area that I've been to recently, so that's an option here. So under storage account, I'm going to create a new one, but just I'd like to first explain the storage account is where my data is going to end up. So the Microsoft Graph Data Connect is going to receive a request for data. It's going to go into SharePoint. It's going to find the data sets. It's going to extract the data based on how I compose the request. And then it's got to store it somewhere. And it's going to store it in this storage account. So let's click Create here. Okay, now the first thing I got to do is pick that subscription. And this happens to be the only one that I have. If you have multiple subscriptions, you'll have to choose one from there. Okay, now it's selected my resource group by default, which is great. And now I'm going to pick a name for my storage account. Now my storage account here, this needs to be a unique name. I'm going to call it MGDC storage. Okay, now here also, I can't have any spaces. I can only have lowercase letters and numbers. So just a little bit of a note there on the name. The region has to be the same region as my M365 tenant, which again here it's Canada Central, which is what I selected for my resource group. I'm going to leave the performance as standard, and I'm going to click Review. Actually, sorry, I'm going to go to the Advanced tab next. Now, under Advanced tab, I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to choose Enable Hierarchical Namespace. Now I'm going to click Review. It's running some validation on it. You can see that right there. We're just waiting for the Create button to become enabled. Validation failed. Let's see what happened. Look at that. The storage account name MGDC storage is already taken. So like I said, this needs to be a unique name. So I can't use a name that I've used before. So I'm going to come back to storage accounts. I'm going to create a new one again, and I'm just going to give it a slightly different name. So I'm going to call this MGDC storage 2. Oh, looks like that one's already taken. Let's try 3. All right, I think we're in okay shape there. Okay, remember we go next to advanced again. We enable hierarchical namespace. Click review. Wait for that validation to finish. Okay, that finished successfully. So now we're going to click create. Okay, now it's deploying that storage account. We're going to wait for that to finish. You can see it says their deployment's in progress. Our deployment's still in progress. We're just going to wait for that to finish. Okay, now that it's completed, and we can see the deployment succeeded up here in the top right, I'm going to click Go to Resource. Okay, so now we're looking at our storage account, MGDC Storage 3. Remember, we had to give it a unique name. Okay, so now we are going to click on access keys. So down here in the left-hand menu, you can see the menu option access keys. So we're going to go there. Okay. And we can see two keys here. We can see key 1 and we can see key 2. Okay. Now we're going to copy one of these keys. So either key 1 or key 2, it doesn't matter which one. We're just going to show one of them, and then we're going to click on the little copy button. Okay, and again, I'm going to copy that into here. So I'm going to call that storage account key. Okay, and we're going to keep that till later. Again, save my notepad file. Okay, now we need to grant access to this storage account. So now here in the left-hand menu, we're going to click on Access Control IAM. Okay, now we want to add a role assignment. So we're going to go to Role Assignments. Okay, and I'm going to click Add and click Add Role Assignment. Okay, now I've got to pick the role. And specifically, the role that I need is Storage Blob Data Contributor. So these are in alphabetical order. Storage Blob Data Contributor, that one right there. So we're going to select that. And we're going to click Next. Okay, now in the Members tab, which we're on by default, we're going to make sure that we've got user group or service principal selected. That's what we want to use. And we're going to click Select Members. Now here we're going to select our newly created app ID. So remember we called our app Microsoft Graph Data Connect app. So we're going to select that app. Okay. We're going to click Select. Then we're going to click down here at the bottom left, Review and Assign. Okay, and it's adding that role assignment. Okay, once that's been added, we're now here in the left-hand menu, we're going to come to containers. So we're going to click on containers in the left menu, and we're going to click on plus container. Now, in this storage account, we're going to add a container, and this is where the actual data files are going to get stored. So I'm going to click plus container. Okay. Now here, I'm going to call this MGDC files. I'm going to have it all lowercase. Okay, and I'm going to click create. Okay, so that was created. Now we're going to select our new container, this here. And then we're going to click plus add directory here, this second option. Now, this is going to be a subfolder within that container. So I'm just going to call it sites. Okay, and this is where, when we use Azure Synapse a little bit later to create a pipeline where it's going to extract data and it's going to store a data file that contains that data, it's going to store it in this subdirectory. So there we go. We've got that folder now, or subdirectory there. Okay, if we go into there, there's nothing else there right now. But ultimately, this is what our container looks like. Okay, and at this point, we've actually we've completed setting up all of the prerequisites within Microsoft 365 Admin Center and Azure for utilizing Project Archimedes. Now we have to wait 48 hours for the data sets to be deployed. Now, it turns out it's not just 48 hours. After 48 hours from enabling the Microsoft Graph Data Connect, as we saw in settings, so 48 hours after we enable this option right here, that's when the data sets become available. But when we actually run the pipeline, it only allows us to go it only allows us to start 2 days back. So you'll likely actually have to wait 4 days before you can run effective um, pipelines to extract the data. So be patient at this point. We need to wait at least 48 hours, and then you need another 2 days in order for the data to become available. All right, thanks for watching this video. Our next video is actually going to show us how to use Azure Synapse in order to actually create and run the pipeline. Thanks very much.